Have you ever wondered why doing the right thing sometimes seems to make life harder? We often grow up believing that honesty leads to success, that integrity is always rewarded, that if we remain faithful to God, everything will eventually work out. But Joseph's story reminds us that God's timing is not always our timing. Sometimes, the greatest tests come just before the greatest breakthroughs. When Joseph first arrived in Egypt, he had nothing. He was a stranger in a foreign land, a young Hebrew, far from home, far from his father, far from everyone who loved him. He had been betrayed by his own brothers, sold like property, and carried hundreds of miles away to a land whose language, whose customs, and whose gods were completely unfamiliar. Most people would have allowed bitterness to consume them. Many would have stopped caring. Others would have blamed God. But Joseph chose a different path. He chose faithfulness. Day after day, he worked, not because he was forced to, but because his character remained stronger than his circumstances. As the months passed, his diligence began to attract attention. The servants noticed, the overseers noticed, and eventually, Potiphar noticed. Potiphar was no ordinary man. He was the captain of Pharaoh's guard, one of the highest-ranking officials in all of Egypt. His household was large. His responsibilities were enormous. He needed someone he could trust completely. Among all his servants, Joseph stood apart. Not because he was Egyptian, not because he spoke the language perfectly, not because he came from wealth, but because everything he did with excellence. Then the Bible gives us a simple but powerful reason for Joseph's success. The Lord was with Joseph. Those 5 words explain everything. Joseph wasn't successful because of luck. He wasn't promoted because of favor from people alone. God was blessing the work of a faithful servant. Months became years. Joseph learned the Egyptian language. He learned their customs. He learned how to manage workers, how to organize supplies, how to oversee large estates. Without realizing it, God was preparing him. Every ordinary task, every responsibility, every challenge was training him for something much greater. Eventually, Potiphar trusted Joseph with everything. The servants answered to him. The fields prospered under his care. The livestock multiplied. The storehouses remained full. Potiphar no longer worried about anything in his house, except the food placed before him. Imagine that. A young man who had once been sold for 20 pieces of silver now managed one of Egypt's most important households. It seemed that Joseph's suffering was finally over. But another storm was quietly approaching. The Bible tells us that Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. His character had earned respect. His appearance attracted attention. Potiphar's wife began watching him. At first, perhaps it was only curiosity, then admiration. Soon, it became temptation. Day after day, she approached Joseph, again and again. Her invitation never changed. Come with me. Joseph could have convinced himself that nobody would ever know. His family was hundreds of miles away. No one from Canaan would ever hear about it. No one would discover the truth. But Joseph understood something that many people forget. Even when no one else is watching, God sees. Integrity isn't tested in public. It's tested in private. One day, Joseph answered her, "My master trusts me with everything in this house. He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife." Then Joseph asked a question that still echoes through history. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Notice what Joseph didn't say. He didn't say, "I might lose my position." He didn't say, "I might get caught." His greatest concern wasn't protecting his reputation. It was honoring God. Real integrity isn't choosing what's right because people are watching. It's choosing what's right, even when no one is. But temptation rarely gives up after the first refusal. Every day, Potiphar's wife continued. Every day, Joseph refused until one ordinary morning. Everything changed. Most of the servants had gone out. The halls of the house were unusually quiet. Joseph entered to carry out his daily work. Perhaps he expected another ordinary day. Instead, he walked into the greatest test of his life. Potiphar's wife confronted him once again. This time, she grabbed hold of his cloak. "Come with me." For a brief moment, Joseph faced a choice: stay or run. Without hesitation, Joseph ran. He escaped from the house, leaving his cloak behind in her hands. Sometimes, the strongest act of courage is knowing when to run. Joseph lost his cloak, but he kept his character. Humiliated by Joseph's refusal, Potiphar's wife became furious. Holding Joseph's cloak, she called the servants together. She falsely accused Joseph of attacking her. The very cloak that proved Joseph had fled was twisted into false evidence against him. When Potiphar returned home, she repeated the same lie. Imagine standing there, knowing you had done the right thing, knowing the truth, watching lies become accepted as fact without hearing Joseph's side of the story. Potiphar ordered that Joseph be thrown into prison. Just like that, everything Joseph had built was taken away. His position, gone. His responsibilities, gone. His freedom, gone. Once again, Joseph found himself behind closed doors. Think about Joseph's journey. His brothers betrayed him. He was sold into slavery. He served faithfully. God blessed his work. He resisted temptation. He honored God. And now he was sitting inside a prison cell. If anyone had reason to question God, it was Joseph. Yet the Bible never tells us that Joseph became bitter. It never tells us that he gave up. It never tells us that he stopped trusting God. Sometimes, faith isn't believing that life will become easier. Faith is believing that God is still working, even when nothing seems to make sense. What Joseph couldn't see was that this prison held men who served Pharaoh himself, men whose lives would soon intersect with his own. What looked like punishment was actually preparation. What looked like failure was positioning. And what looked like the end was only the beginning of God's next chapter. Join us in the next episode as we discover how a forgotten prisoner earned the trust of an entire prison, how two mysterious dreams changed everything, and how God began opening the door from a prison cell to a palace. Until next time, keep exploring the stories, keep discovering the truth, and keep searching the scriptures like the Bereans.